Hello everybody and welcome to Round 3 Reviews, back with a Hong Kong content review and finishing off the Iron Angel series, part of the new Vinegar Syndrome release, which have done all three films on a region-free set, HD format from the original negatives, packed full of special features, a really awesome set if you're a huge fan of these films or if you're wanting to dive into some girls with guns, low budget, DIY kind of action Hong Kong movies. I say DIY, I say kind of low budget, but the more I look into these films, and especially diving into the extras, these are relatively quite expensive films for the time they were made in, considering on the same budget as the Sammo Hung movies. So they weren't exactly cheap, being the fact you had the director of the film, same director as the first two as mentioned, Teresa Wong, who basically was the producer, script supervisor, everything. She did all those roles, basically financed the entire film, heavy producer, and basically did everything in this film to make it work and make it happen. And in terms of her production company as well, and hiring in loads of different talented people, not just within actors, but also different technical aspects and directors and kind of action directors and, you know, different types of what unofficial type roles which had no contract, had no specific type of agreements, but just, hey, can you do this? Yes, or I'm going to pay you a certain salary that could be less stressful or could be more beneficial for you in the long run, which is why you get Stanley Tong involved in 2 and 3 later on, which there's a whole brand new extra of him on the edition as well, talking about his experience making the film, including some of the other directors and action directors that was involved in this film. It's very interesting. It seems like a very once-in-a-lifetime kind of opportunity in terms of these films. These were, you know, a wealthy person who wanted to get into the business, who had a lot of cash, a lot of money, a lot of resources, and had, you know, very specific vision of these films. And they made a lot of money from the sounds of it, and they were quite successful, especially with the international market as well, playing really big in terms of the VHS. If you do look back at all 3 films, the production value is quite impressive in terms of the amount of you know, practical effects and explosions and rentals and just, you know, using a specific kind of location. This time around it's in Thailand, and just really expensive, you know, probably not cheap, kind of, you know, getting this amount of crew, this amount of extras, this amount of experts involved, from both the front of the camera and behind the camera. There's a lot going on, a lot of spinning wheels going on, and this definitely was a trilogy of films, you know, to be made in a certain way, to be executed in a certain way for a one person's specific vision of these Iron Angel films, and packaged and sold and shipped off to make a lot of money. And it seemed like it worked definitely at the time. The story and the characters are just so lacking, and as I said before multiple times, you can have all the best action in the world, you can have all the best stunts, and they are pretty goddamn fun to say the least, and they're definitely ones that you want to revisit kind of time and time again. If your investment level with your villain, your characters, and, you know, and your story is kind of lacking in this department, it's just not going to be as engaging. It's not going to be as fun to watch. You know, at the end of the day, you need good characters, you need good storyline to channel through all that stuff. Similar to what I've said with some of the Japanese reviews I've done recently, if you're going to do an exploitation film, you can do all that kind of, you know, sleazy type of material, but you have to channel it through for something. Erotic ghost story films knew what they were doing with that, and same with Six and Zen and all these other films. This is a action film, girls with guns, femme fatale, kind of vehicle-based kind of films, cashing in on those kind of in-line duty movies that started it all during the 80s, which the 80s for Hong Kong cinema was like chef's kiss. You're getting such variety of different types of films within the action department and within the supernatural department, which I've covered a little bit of that as well. I think with these films, you do need some investment level, and I think you can look at these things one of 2 ways. One, I'm getting a cheap thrills, fun, kind of, you know, relatively low budget, than more than a typical Jackie Chan film would be. I'm getting the action I want, and I don't really care too much about these characters or the storyline. I'm just getting some fun fights and some fun action. You can see it that way, enjoy it, and you can have a nice, real cool, fancy packaging from Vinegar Syndrome to kind of highlight that for sure. Or 2, you appreciate the action, but the story, the characters are so lacking to the point where you're just not caring about what's going on screen, and it just becomes a background film. And I think with this film leading into Iron Angel 3, this is definitely apparent to that other option, as I mentioned. I enjoyed the first 2. I think they had some problems. They had, despite their flaws and limitations, as mentioned, they had some good quality charming, kind of likable kind of characters, and you had some investment there in terms of the villain or some of the hero characters, or at least the action department was great. And this third one, I was really bored. It's definitely the furthest away from the Girls with Guns kind of, femme fatale series they're trying to go for, with Moonlee being weirdly enough more in the film compared to the first two. I would say she actually has a lot more to do. She opens the film, she has some really cool fight scenes in this kind of temple where she's undercover, and she has a really cool nunchuck fight as well, which is fucking awesome. It's great. It's great to see Moonlee really kind of taking central stage in terms of her action and giving her completely by herself. She's not, no one else is kind of interfering, which is the problem with the first two movies, where like she gets really awesome fight sequences or action moments at times, and then someone comes in and steals the last second, which is just really infuriating. Within this third one, all of her scenes are great. They're really good, and they definitely are utilizing her in that aspect. However, I have to say this straight away, the fact that she's not in that third final act is a real big sin to the film, and a real big, like, what the heck is going on? You spend so much time with these other characters, and it's just so uninteresting and so boring, and it's like, get back to fucking her. She has the most interesting mission in terms of being undercover. She has the most dangerous kind of thing where she's going against the numbers, very Raid style, in the sense of like her being a single kind of angel agent in a whole temple in the middle of nowhere with multiple people being suspicious of her, and she has to kind of pretend to be this kind of legendary Japanese kind of, assassin type character, and she's definitely delivering the action, delivering the goods, and all of her scenes are great in the film. And the fact that she's not in the third and final action moment and facing off the completing the undercover mission that she was doing with the other femme fatale villain character that comes into it is a real big sin and a real big stain to the film. And I think everyone does agree upon that. Everyone is pretty shocked by that. She does appear in the end of the film doing one last gag, which is kind of like, it's just okay. It's just unnecessary. It kind of, again, that draws out the kind of the runtime a little bit further as well. Doesn't really add much to it, which is a damn shame. And I will say I will be diving into some more Moonlee films as I can find them in decent quality enough on English subtitles. However, unfortunately, Alexander Fungchung's son has been given an upgrade, given more screen time this time around, and it is continuing to be the main leading actor for the series, with a departure from another actress in the film, Elaine Fui Sung-hung, which departed from this third film due to a contract dispute. She does have a really cool extra on this edition, about 20 minutes or so, talking about her experience making the, basically the first two movies, of course, and basically how dangerous these stunts were and what she probably shouldn't be doing and she did, and things that she refused, and how she just kind of threw herself into this role and this character. And it's a really cool, nice, delightful little extra. Seeing her kind of modern day talking about these films, and has, it's an interesting kind of, conversation. It's been talked about in other previous editions and films I've watched, where like these films are bigger in kind of the States and the UK and Europe more than they are in basically Hong Kong. And it's interesting, obviously, when you get these collaborators like Vinegar Syndrome or 88 kind of doing these fresh new interviews with these kind of collaborators, whether they're kind of the stars, whether they're the producers or the directors, and just kind of talking about these films and reminiscing and saying how much of a classic they are, or performance is iconic. And it's very humble. I love that. And unfortunately, she's not involved in this one, which is real damaging to the film, because that's why they kind of separate Moonlee. It's kind of an undercover mission, separate to the main story, really. And most of the film is basically about this character and him continuing on through the agency for the CIA, and basically having to try and undercover a terrorist group cell, which is basically kind of threatening to disrupt a part of the government in Thailand. And essentially he's just doing a bunch of stuff. He's not really doing anything. He's putting words together like, garden party. It's like, oh, it must be this. So entering into a boxing match, which takes up a lot of the runtime for no reason. And that leads up to everything about the story and the pacing and how things get to one point to another is so piss poor and so awful. It shouldn't bother most people. And I think anyone's watching these kind of movies, probably just here for the action, here for a bit of a vibe, a bit of a flavor. For me, at least the first two movies do have somewhat of a story, and either they are messy, they're not always coherent. You get to point A to point B to point C just about enough, and you have some really cool action throughout the entire thing. While I do think the action in this film is pretty fun, I was kind of bored and done, and just kind of like, okay, I'm over it now. Even the whole jetpack scene towards the third act, grand fun, but just kind of got bored of it, and it's like, this is impractical. And just when your mind starts going backwards, thinking this is stupid and fun, and voting that is impractical, you know, kind of stupid and just not going to work, because the bad guy can literally just go whoop, that's it, dead straight away. There's no protective gear, there's no kind of armor. You know, granted, you're in a cool jetpack with machine guns, cool, but all I have to do is just fire, boom, and that's it, you're dead, you're done. And it's like, when I'm starting to think about the logic of all these action scenes and these moments, and the biker gang coming in, getting all killed, and then the truck coming in, getting killed, it's just like, there's no real plan here, was there? There's just like, the bad guys just turned up and just wrecked the day, and a lot of them got killed for very stupid means, or didn't really think the plan through, or, you know, and then even the bad guys you do get presented with are not fleshed out, they're not really part of the story that much. You know, they're just a terrorist cell, and then you get the one general character, which is just kind of beating up people in his one location room. Yeah, I just didn't vibe with this film, didn't care for what happened in this film. So yeah, it's a bit of a shame Iron Angel 3 had to go with a bit of a whimper here, which is tends to be the case with a lot of these kind of action-based kind of films, where, you know, Tie Cage also had the same thing, with the first two being pretty solid, and then the third one being quite bad as well, and just kind of being a really strange kind of departure from the first two. And this is the exact same thing. While I do think this film is better than Tie Cage 3, HMS has better action, has better stars in it, I think, compared to the Tie Cage 3. I think this one is quite forgettable and just not really as enjoyable compared to the first two, which is a bit of a shame. So what are your thoughts and impressions on Iron Angel 3? Please come down below. What are your thoughts on the Vinegar Syndrome release in terms of the packed full of special features and the HD transfers? Is this a great set for you? Are you really happy with these films? Are there many other kind of Guilds of Guns series you think Vinegar Syndrome should dive into next? Who knows if this does well, which it looks like it has done quite well. You might get some more down the line. You never know in full HD. So meantime, guys, I'm Full Reviews, signing out.